Hey everybody, and welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. And tonight we are going to be taking a little look at the new third edition of Arkham Horror. Before we crack open the box, I do want to talk a little bit about games based on H.P. Lovecraft writing. So, the back of the box here says, let's see, the end is near, Massachusetts, 1926. Too long has the city of Arkham lived on its placid island of ignorance in the midst of the black seas of infinity. Only a small handful of unlucky investigators dare plunge into the abyss to struggle against the ancient evils that threaten reality from every corner of this New England town. Arkham Horror is a cooperative game of mystery and terror for up to 6 players, inspired by the writings of H.P. Lovecraft. Each unique scenario puts you in the shoes of one of Arkham's investigators as they explore the streets of the city and work together to save humanity from unknowable horrors. Now, there are quite a few games that are based upon the works of H.P. Lovecraft or inspired by H.P. Lovecraft. And I would be willing to bet that most of them aren't actually based or inspired specifically by the stories of H.P. Lovecraft, by the writings of H.P. Lovecraft, and are actually more generally inspired by the work that H.P. Lovecraft inspired. In my opinion, H.P. Lovecraft's greatest gift to the literary world was his relaxed views on copyright and the fact that he encouraged and allowed other writers to embellish upon his creations and to continue to work on his creations to craft this what we call the mythos. Actually, he himself was embellishing upon ideas written by authors before him when he was working in the mythos fiction. If you take all of Lovecraft's work and you look at the stories that actually deal with Cthulhu and the Elder Gods, they don't make up a huge portion of his total body of work. Now, I am no expert on H.P. Lovecraft. I don't claim to be. I am at best a casual fan. But if you want to know more about Lovecraft, there are 2 people who are experts and who you can read, and that is Lynn Carter, and this is a pretty good book, Lovecraft: A Look Behind the Cthulhu Mythos. The background of a myth that has captured a generation. Okay, it has captured multiple generations. This is a nonfiction book, collection of essays, all written by Lynn Carter. And he also has a complete bibliography of the mythos. So lots of information in here that you can read to expand your knowledge on H.P. Lovecraft. And then, of course, the world's eminent scholar on Lovecraft and probably weird fiction in general is S.T. Joshi. So I appreciate Joshi when he is dealing with H.P. Lovecraft. I disagree with a lot of what he has to say when it comes to horror in general. I think he is far too dismissive of certain authors just because they happen to deal more in basic good and evil, black and white, or deal more in works of more inspired by Western Christian ideas of morality. He's a very staunch, not even an atheist, I would say, but like an anti-theist. And so a lot of his work is informed by that. And I just come from a different background and approach things in a different way than he does. But his criticism and his life's work devoted to the fiction of H.P. Lovecraft and Lovecraft's life, who Lovecraft had an interesting life. He was, by today's standards, he would be considered racist. However, Joshi sheds light on that, showing that it was a far, far more nuanced part of Lovecraft's life than modern critics tend to give Lovecraft credit for. A lot of younger people today flat out dismiss everything about Lovecraft because he was a racist, he was a racist. Well, he did have some racist tendencies, yes. And at one point in his life, he probably was very racist. But he grew and he changed. And through his letters that you read, you can tell that he thought about those ideas and grew out of them. So, if you want to read stuff about Lovecraft and become more of an expert, these two books are great starting places. So Lovecraft, as far as I'm concerned, he is not my favorite author of weird fiction. Not by far. And the Call of Cthulhu isn't even really like the first of the Mythos stories. And I think there are people who are just as important to the modern day popularity of the mythos. And two of those people, of course, are August Derleth, who was one of the original publishers of Lovecraft and of the weird fiction authors. And he also, helped to put the Lovecraft literary circle in a group and cultivate the mythos. And then later was Robert M. Price. Now, Robert M. Price kind of has people love him, people hate him, he has a questionable place within the mythos realms, I guess you could say. But his work on the Cthulhu Cycle books put out by the Chaosium Fiction these are indispensable volumes when it comes to the to mythos fiction, because he has worked to kind of put all of these stories from all these different authors and time periods together to actually create what we think of as the mythos today. So I am going to be working on my a video of my top 5 favorite weird fiction stories, and I probably will give one away right now, but that's by A. Merritt. And his story, The People of the Pit, was actually published in 1918. So, that's actually almost 10 years before The Call of Cthulhu. And it is very much a work of Cthulhu fiction, of mythos fiction, of cosmic horror, and it's a fantastic story. And I know it's been published before. You can find it online for free. I'm pretty sure it's in public domain. But if you've never read A. Merritt, highly, highly recommended. This collection of short stories is fantastic, and he has a ton of great stuff. And then there's also, of course, Robert W. Chambers, The King in Yellow, which was from 1895. And so Lovecraft was expanding upon ideas from previous authors, Machen and Algernon Blackwood. And then he worked up to a certain point, and then he allowed other people, Clark Ashton Smith and Brian Lumley, August Derleth, and all these other people to continue to work in this grand tradition. And all of these authors, what I'm trying to say is all of these authors came together to create to create the mythos fiction, what we consider mythos fiction. And so there are more authors than just H.P. Lovecraft. And that's what I wish that some of these board games, a long way in saying that I wish some of these board games would mention on the backs of their boxes or in their rule books or their lore books the other authors besides H.P. Lovecraft, because there are just so many. Just in these a few books I have here, Robert W. Chambers, Lord Dunsany, my all-time favorite writer of fantasy. His stuff is just fantastic. James Wade. Some of these I don't even haven't heard of except for in these books. They don't have huge careers outside of these collections. But Ambrose Bierce, was working way before Lovecraft, I believe. James Blish, the great sci-fi authors in here. Ramsey Campbell, Lynn Carter, August Derleth, Arthur Machen, James Wade, Carl Edward Wagner, Robert E. Howard, Brian Lumley again. Yeah, just like all kinds of great authors. Clark Ashton Smith, Manly Wade Wellman, Gary Myers, Stanley C. Sargent. So I guess just what I'm saying is that the stories and the lore and the myths that all of these board games are based off of, they're based off of more than just the works of H.P. Lovecraft. And I would like to see the other authors get their due. But that's enough of that. So hopefully you guys, if any of those books looked interesting, hopefully, I'm sure everyone knows about the Cthulhu Cycle series of books. These are just collections, all mostly all edited by Robert M. Price. And these are the books that when people mention the Cthulhu Mythos, these are usually the books that they're talking about. These are the books that people read back in the day that really consolidated and informed our popular notion of cosmic horror. Now we're on to Arkham Horror. So my history with Arkham Horror, I never played the first edition. I played the second edition a lot. I had a ton of it. I sold it during my last board game purge. My buddy has everything though, so when we want to play, we can still play. So the interesting thing about the second edition of Arkham Horror, and I guess the first edition too, created by Richard Launius, probably among the very first of the cooperative games. When Arkham Horror, the second edition, first came out, I was not playing board games at that time. I was playing RPGs and collectible card games, so mainly probably Magic, Pokemon, and Shadow Fist. So I had been out of the board game hobby for quite a long time, so I was not into it when that first kind of initial wave of German games hit. And I was unaware of the progression that games had made. The games I played were mainly the Games Workshop games and Talisman and that kind of stuff. And so I was out of the loop for a really long time, and I was completely unaware of the way the way that gaming literacy had progressed. So knowing about board games is very much like reading books. You gain a sense of knowledge, you gain literacy in board games. So whereas you learn to play one game, you automatically kind of know how to play a bunch of games. So if you learn how to play one worker placement game, you already know the basics for like all worker placement games. If you learn one co-op game, if you learned Arkham Horror or Pandemic, you could easily play a whole bunch of other games without learning all the rules again, or at least the general set of rules, because your gaming literacy has progressed. So when the second edition came out, my gaming literacy was still stuck back in like the mid 90s. And so it seriously took me like 6 months to learn how to play Arkham Horror second edition, because I could not even comprehend how you were supposed to play against the board and how the monsters moved. And I'd gone to the game store looking for something like Talisman because I wanted to play something that I remembered having fun with, and that game was out of print at the time. And there weren't a lot of fantasy, horror, adventure games out at that time, like 2003 or so. There just weren't a lot of games like this. And the guy at Uncle's Games up here in Redmond, I think, suggested Arkham Horror second edition, and I got it, and it looked amazing. It's so many components. The board was huge, so many cards, so many chits. And it just kind of like, I set it up on the table and I just kind of stared at it for months. My friends and I tried to figure out how to play, and I finally downloaded this like incredibly detailed flow chart of how to play the game from the Board Game Geek. That was the first time I ever went there, and learned how to play it, loved it, bought all kinds of expansions, and sold it. Was thinking about getting back into it, or thinking about getting into Eldritch Horror, but then I heard about the third edition, and that it was designed by Nikki Valens, which I believe she did Legacy of Dragonholt, which I absolutely love. I'm pretty sure that was her game. And so I have a feeling that I'm really going to like this, because the direction now is more on scenarios and more on narrative and have more of a focus. For as much stuff as the second edition had in Arkham Horror, all of the games kind of felt the same. They all pretty much boiled down to the same thing. Either you got enough clues and sealed enough gates to win, or you spent the last 15 minutes rolling handfuls of dice trying to beat the Elder God. And you had fun along the way, but the games didn't have an ebb and flow of a natural narrative. So I'm really hoping that this gives us that. So I went to my local game store to pick this up. Every once in a while I will go to a game store to pick up a game. I live like 2 blocks away from one. So I paid retail for this, which I don't like paying retail for my games. They're so expensive, but every once in a while I like to throw them a bone. They're very nice people. They have good beer. And Nick, it's at Around the Table up here over in Linwood. And Nick, the guy, he threw in this deluxe rulebook for free for me. And so very happy with this. And I thought this was just rules, but no, this book is really cool. If you guys have a chance to get this, get it. Because it has the very first few pages are actually a history of Arkham Horror written by Richard Launius. I would love to get my hands on, or at least at one time play, first edition. But I love stuff like this. I love board game history, and I wish there was more things like this. So I'm really looking forward to reading that. I was very surprised with this book. So then you get into the rules. So like all Fantasy Flight games now, the rules are in two. You have like the learn how to play and then the appendix kind of thing. So this has all of that together in one volume. The rules reference in alphabetical order. But then the cool thing is, after this, really, the new art in this is freaking awesome. You have like 20 or so pages. How many is it? Oh man, like 50 pages of lore, 40 pages of lore. That is awesome. I cannot wait to read all of this stuff. It's really going to help me get into the spirit of the game, I think. Has detailed information about all of the locations. I'm sure it has some really cool stories, because I know that Nikki Valens was really interested in driving narrative home in games. I am intensely interested at what she's going to do next. I need to find out now that she's no longer at Fantasy Flight. Hopefully she's doing some interesting things. But yeah, this book is excellent. I was very, very surprised at how cool it is. So like I said, try to get this if you are at all interested in Arkham Horror. All right, so now let's crack open the box like 30 minutes later. One of my rambling videos. So you can tell. You can tell right off the bat that this is a very different game. So there's no longer a main board. It is scenario based, and it has a modular board. So there's 4 scenarios included, and each scenario has a different board. So here's the learn to play rules, and then the rules reference, so 2. That's got a really nice look to it. I like that. I like those colors. Very nice. Of course, Fantasy Flight, the trench box. Everybody loves those, right? So let's see. Here's the punch boards. Let's see what you get. I know some people have been complaining that maybe you don't get as much stuff in these as you did in the second edition, but if it's more focused and things mean more, then I'm totally okay with that. So hopefully that is the case. So the main board pieces are pretty big here. Let's see here. Yeah, pretty good size, double-sided. I do like the art. Some people were saying that it was way too dark, that they couldn't even read their tiles, but I don't think that is the case at all. It is dark, but I'm pretty sure this game is supposed to take place at night, not in broad daylight. I do like the art. I do like the size of these. That's nice. Here are some of the player standees. So that gives you kind of an idea of the size of each of the squares or each of the spaces. And it looks like everything is all new art from what I remember, which is really good. I know they've been recycling the art in these games, in the Arkham games, for quite some time now. And it looks to me like it might be all new art. I even think the clue tokens are new. I could be mistaken, but if I'm not, that is exciting because it really does need a change. I think they really need to shake up their Arkham line of games, and I'm hoping that this will do that. That's a really nice tile. I really like that color, that kind of swampy green with the Miskatonic University. Still got your insanity and your health. I don't know what these are. Probably the gates or something. I guess maybe the tiles, maybe they look a little similar. I could see that complaint. Maybe that's what people were saying. And so you no longer are able to adjust your focus on your character. The characters have fixed stats, but I know now you have these focus tokens, I think they are. And that's kind of how you dictate what you're going to do on your turn, rather than moving the pegs up and down, or the sliders, which that was always super fiddly. Nobody ever remembered, and we always just, hey, let's say I did this. So yeah, I'm glad they got rid of that. It has a little card stand because you put together a deck of cards for when you play certain scenarios. So you only use certain cards on certain scenarios. And it looks like regular six-sided dice. Nothing special about them. That's too bad. They should have had like the Elder sign on the six. Or maybe some green pips or something. And let's take a look at the card. So I think it's 12 investigators in the base box, which is a really good number. I was expecting 8, but I think it's 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So yeah, if I'm not mistaken, that seems to be new art there. Calvin Wright, Agnes Baker, Daniela Reyes, Dexter Drake, Jenny Barnes, good old Jenny Barnes, Mary Lambeau, Michael McGlynn, Min Tai Fan, Norman Withers, Rex Murphy, and Tommy Muldoon, and Wendy Adams. And I think Ashcan Pete, wasn't that the guy's name? I think he's like a promo character or something. So on the back you have your story, your starting possessions, and it gives you your primary and secondary roles. It gives you ideas of how you're supposed to play these characters. So you have like, she's a survivor and a seeker, he's a guardian and a survivor, or a seeker and a rogue, a seeker survivor, a rogue, a mystic. So I like that. It gives you like probably some direction of how you're supposed to play the character. And then you have, your focus limit. So that's probably how many tokens, focus tokens you can have. Your health, your sanity, your lore, influence, observation, strength, and will. And then each person, of course, has their own little special power. Then here are the 4 scenarios. So we have the Approach of Azathoth. Really nice art. I really like these scenario cards. They're a little thin. I'll probably end up laminating mine. I always like to laminate these kinds of cards. The Feast of Mordoth. The ghouls that dwell beneath the earth hunger for the flesh of corpses, yet even they live in worshipful fear of the devourer below. I think, wasn't that a Brian Lumley novel, The Devourer Below? I think that might be a Lumley book, if I can remember correctly. So that it shows you how to set up your map, and it shows you how to set up your cup of tokens, and it looks like your add cards 1, 10, 11 to the codex, set aside certain monsters. So yeah, each one of these scenarios is supposed to be quite different. So hopefully the games play differently from each other. The Veil of Twilight, and then there's the Cthulhu Echoes of the Deep. All right, so then you get, looks like 3 packs of cards. You get quite a lot of cards here. Some mini cards, 2 stacks of large cards. I would not be surprised if the way these decks are created are more like the Fallout board game, which I would be okay with. So we got your probably locations and events. Looks like some bosses or something. Looks like a lot of... So yeah, so these are probably supposed to not be shuffled and probably kept in a certain order. So I'm not going to get all those mixed up. The cards feel nice. They're that smaller size. But of course, you know, everything about FFG games feels good. One more deck of cards here, or large cards. Some more location events, encounters. Looks like a lot, so cool. Should be quite a bit of variety. And then we have our small cards. Looks like those are spells. You have the Wither spell. Definitely new art on the Wither spell. A stray dog, an ally. Although, no, that's an ally. Those are allies. That's a cool ally. A wooden homunculus. Alchemic process, astral travel, binding, finding the gate, flesh ward. So, yep, some familiar spells. Anybody familiar with the other Arkham games? Looks like these are all allies. Or special items or something. I don't know. I haven't really looked at the list of components yet. Actually, those are probably starting items. Looks like these guys might be the allies here. And it looks like some items. Then you have your specific cards for each of the investigators. Monster cards. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I'm pretty happy with the amount of stuff you get in this game. And hopefully it plays good and it keeps me excited. I try to get the game on the table this weekend and maybe film a couple turns and see how that goes. So all right, that's Arkham Horror 3rd edition and a little bit about the Mythos literary tradition. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and we will talk to you later. Bye-bye.